Hey there, chickadees and chickadoes. This is the recording for A Pair of Silk Stockings by Kate Chopin. American writer Kate Chopin wrote the short story A Pair of Silk Stockings in April of 1896. The story was published in 1897. Chopin is known for writing stories about women who lived in the late 19th century, so 1800s, and their roles in society. The story takes place over a single day. A young mother wanders through town with some unexpected extra money in hand. She spends the extra funds on herself rather than on her family as she had originally planned. So, as we read through the story, I want you to think about what is going on with our main character, Mrs. Summers, about the kind of person she is and wants to be, what she desires, and the realities of her life, and that inner struggle, that inner conflict that she's dealing with. Little Mrs. Summers one day found herself the unexpected possessor of $15. It seemed to her a very a large amount of money, and the way in which it stuffed and bulged her worn old purse gave her a feeling of importance, such as she had not enjoyed for years. The question of investment was one that occupied her greatly. For a day or two, she walked about apparently in a dreamy state, but really absorbed in speculation and calculation. She did not wish to act hastily, to do anything she might afterward regret. But it was during the still hours of the night, when she would lay awake revolving plans in her mind, that she seemed to see her way clearly towards a proper and judicious use of the money. A dollar or two should be added to the price usually paid for Janie's shoes, which would ensure their lasting much longer than they usually did. She would buy so and so many yards of fabric for new shirts for the boys and Janie and Mag, and she intended to make the old ones do by skillfully patching. Mag should have another gown. She had seen some beautiful patterns, veritable bargains in the shop windows, and still there would be left enough for new stockings, 2 pairs apiece, and what darning that would save for a while. She would get caps for the boys and sailor hats for the girls. The vision of her children looking fresh and dainty and new for once in their lives excited her and made her restless and wakeful with anticipation. So, what I want you to see here is our character, and since our small problem that we're dealing with, she has money and she's trying to figure out the best way to spend it. She doesn't want to go out and just waste the money. She wants to make sure that she's making the best choices possible. And to think about it, think about who she's thinking about spending the money on. She wants to spend it on her children, her 2 boys and her 2 girls, giving them a chance to look fresh, as she says, for once in their lives. So, from that, we should infer that they don't have a lot of money and they have to make the dollar stretch. They have to be very frugal in their choices. They don't have a lot of extra money to spend to buy the niceties that they desire. They just have to make do with what they got. For one of the items I want you to think is the girls would be able to get two new pairs of stockings, like pantyhose, long socks, and what darning that would save for a while. Darning is to sew, it's to stitch. So whenever there's a rip or a hole in the garment, especially these stockings, she would have to sew up that hole and make a patch of it. So if she gets them 2 new stockings, then it would save her from actually having to stitch up those holes. It would give her a break from making them look new again or usable again. So she's thinking about how to spend this money. She's being very calculated in how she's doing it. And she's going to turn around and spend the money on her children, on just some new clothes, on better shoes so they last longer, on some new shirts that they too last longer. The neighbors sometimes talked of certain better days that little Mrs. Summers had known before she had even thought of being Mrs. Summers. She herself did not think about the old days. She had no time, no second of time to devote to the past. The needs of the present absorbed her every thought. A vision of the future, like some dim, gaunt monster, sometimes appalled her, but luckily, tomorrow never comes. Mrs. Summers was one who knew the value of bargains, who could stand for hours making her way inch by inch toward the desired object that was selling below cost. She would elbow her way if need be. She had learned to clutch a piece of goods and hold it and stick to it with persistence and determination until her turn came to be served, no matter when it came. So we can see as a characterization for Miss Summers that she is a stickler for a good bargain, that she'll stand in those long lines just to get the item that she wants. Like she is uh, that Thanksgiving night shopper who's there waiting to get the good price, who's waiting for Amazon Prime Day. And that she used to know these days, the days where she could actually spend money on herself, days that where she didn't have to worry about anybody else before she was even a wife, before she was even a mother. But those days are gone. Now she's totally consumed by the duties that are to her children. She has no time to think of herself, no time to plan for herself. It's all about the needs of her children. But that day, she was a little faint and tired. She had eaten a light lunch. No. When she came to think of it, between getting the children fed and the place rightened and preparing herself for the shopping trip, she had actually forgotten to eat any lunch at all. She sat herself upon a revolving stool before a counter that was comparatively empty, trying to gather strength and courage to start her shopping. A limp feeling had come over her, and she rested her hand aimlessly upon the counter. She wore no gloves. By degrees, she grew aware that her hand had encountered something very soothing, very pleasant to touch. She looked down to see that her hand lay upon a pile of silk stockings. A sign nearby announced that they had been reduced in price from 250 to 198, and a young girl who stood behind the counter asked her if she would wish to examine their line of silk hosiery. She smiled, just as if she had been asked to inspect a tiara of diamonds with the ultimate view of purchasing it. But she went on feeling the soft, sheeny, luxurious things with both hands now, holding them up to see them glisten and to feel them glide serpent like through her fingers. All right, so she's on her shopping trip. She's out and about and realized she hasn't eaten. She's feeling fatigued. She's feeling tired. She's feeling dizzy. So she leans over just to kind of like get her bearings to kind of gather up that strength. And when she's there with her hand on the table on the counter, she feels this very beautiful, luxurious, sheeny, like there's a sheen to it, material. And it's the silk stockings. And the lady's asking her, if you would you like to see them? Two red blotches suddenly came to her pale cheeks. She looked up at the girl. Do you think there are any 8.5 among these? There were any number of 8.5. In fact, there were more of that size than any other. Here was a light blue pair, there was some lavender, some all black, and various shades of tan and gray. Mrs. Summer selected a black pair and looked at them very long and closely. She pretended to be examining their texture when the clerk assured her was excellent. $1.98, she mused aloud. Well, I'll take this fare. She handed the girl a $5 bill and waited for her change and for her parcel. What a very small parcel it was. It seemed lost in the depths of her shabby old purse. Mrs. Summers, after that, did not move in the direction of the bargain counter. She took the elevator, which carried her to an upper floor in the region of the ladies' waiting rooms. Here, in a corner, she exchanged her cotton stockings for the new silk ones which she had just bought. She was not reasoning with herself, nor was she trying to explain to her satisfaction the motive of her action. She was not thinking at all. She seemed for the time to be taking a rest from that hard and fatiguing function and to have abandoned herself to some mechanical impulse that directed her actions and freed her of responsibility. So, what I want you to notice here is that there's a shift. There's a change in our little Mrs. Summers. She's acting different now. So, I want you to think about what she intended to buy and what she actually bought and what she's doing now in this paragraph and how this is characterizing her as to the woman she is at this particular moment because she is changing right now. How good was the touch of the raw silk to her flesh. She felt like lying back in the cushioned chair and reveling for a while in the luxury of it. She did for a little while. Then she replaced her shoes, rolled the cotton stockings together, and thrust them into her bag. After doing this, she crossed straight over to the shoe department and took her seat to be fitted. She was fastidious. The clerk could not make her happy. He could not match her shoes with her stockings, and she was not too easily pleased. She held back her skirts and turned her feet one way and her head another as she glanced down at the polished pointed tip boots. Her foot and ankle looked very pretty. She could not understand that they belonged to her and were a part of herself. She wanted an excellent and stylish fit, she told the young fellow who served her, and she did not mind the difference of a dollar or two more in the price as long as she got what she desired. It was a long time since Mrs. Summers had been fitted with gloves. On rare occasions, when she had bought a pair, they were always bargains, so cheap that it would have been preposterous or unreasonable to have expected them to be fitted to the hand. Now she rested her elbow on the cushion of the glove counter, and a pretty, pleasant young creature, delicate and deft of touch, drew a long wristed kid kind of stitch over Mrs. Summer's hand. She smoothed it down over the wrist and buttoned it neatly, and both lost themselves for a second or two in admiring contemplation of the little symmetrical gloved hand. But there were other places where money might be spent. So she bought her stockings, got some boots, and she got some brand new beautiful gloves. There were books and magazines piled up in the window of a stall a few places down the street. Mrs. Summers bought two high-priced magazines, such as she had been accustomed to read in the days when she had been accustomed to other pleasant things, like before being married and being a mom. She carried them without wrapping. As well as she could, she lifted her skirts at the crossings. Her stockings and boots and well-fitting gloves caused her to stand up straighter and given her a feeling of assurance, a sense of belonging to the well-dressed multitude. She was very hungry. Another time she would have stilled the cravings for food until reaching her own home, where she would have brewed herself a cup of tea and taken a snack of anything that was available. But the impulse that was guiding her would not let her think this way. There was a restaurant at the corner. She had never entered its doors. From the outside, she had sometimes caught glimpses of spotless tablecloths and shiny crystal and soft stepping waiters serving people of fashion. When she entered, her appearance created no surprise, as she had half feared it might. She seated herself at a small table alone, and an attentive waiter at once approached her to take her order. She did not want a large meal. She craved a nice and tasty bite, a plump pork chop with salad, something sweet, a glass of Rhine wine, and after all, a small cup of black coffee. While waiting to be served, she removed her gloves very leisurely and laid them beside her. Then she picked up a magazine and glanced through it. It was all very agreeable. The tablecloth was even more spotless than it had seemed through the window, and the crystal more sparkling. There were quiet ladies and gentlemen who did not notice her, lunching at the small tables like her own. A soft, pleasing strain of music could be heard, and a gentle breeze was blowing through the window. She tasted a bite and she read a word or two, and she sipped the amber wine and wiggled her toes in the silk stockings. The price of it made no difference. She counted the money out to the waiter and left an extra coin on his tray, whereupon he bowed before her as before a princess of royal blood. There was still money in her purse, and her next temptation presented itself in the shape of a vanity poster. It was a little later when she entered the theater. The play had begun, and the house seemed to her to be packed, but there were vacant seats here and there, and to one of them she was ushered between brilliantly dressed women who had gone there to kill time and eat candy and show off their clothes. There were many others who were there solely for the play and acting. It was safe to say there was no one present who bore quite the attitude which Miss Summers did to her surroundings. She gathered in the whole, stage and players and people in one wide impression, and absorbed it and enjoyed it. She laughed at the comedy and wept. She and the woman next to her wept over the tragedy, and they talked a little together over it. And the woman wiped her eyes and sniffed on a tiny square of filmy, perfumed lace and passed little Mrs. Summers her box of candy. The play was over. The music ceased. The crowd filed out. It was like a dream ended. People scattered in all directions. Mrs. Summers went to the corner and waited for the cable car. A man with keen eyes, who sat opposite to her, seemed to think she had a pretty face. He wondered what he saw in her expression. In truth, he saw nothing, unless he were wizard enough to detect a poignant wish, a powerful longing that the cable car would never stop anywhere, but go on and on with her forever. So as we see in the story Mrs. Summers having a little day to herself. Very much different from what she expected and what she planned. We see that shift, that change occur in the text with her characterization of how she spent her money. But a lot of the revealing, the universal truth that's coming from this. You know, we talk about the topic of motherhood, we talk about the topic of responsibility. We see that message kind of be enforced here because we have the characters, not the character, the point of view shift from what's going on with Mrs. Summers to this stranger man who's sitting with her on a bus, kind of thinking, looking at her, and it's like kind of figuring out who she is, thinks that she's pretty, but not knowing that deep down inside, Mrs. Summers wish that the train, the little cable car, the bus will go on forever and ever, that she will never have to get off, that she would never have to go back home to her actual responsibilities. Right? So think about what the thematic theme or the thematic statement is, what Kate Chopin is trying to reveal about women in society at this time in the late 1800s. Right? Love y'all. Have a good day.